Welcome to a new episode from English Plus Podcast. Today's episode is about collocations, and we're going to talk about collocations from an advanced level perspective. So today is going to be an advanced introduction to collocations. Remember that you can find the transcript of this episode in a link I will leave in the description, and you can become a patron of this show on Patreon, and then you will get PDF practice worksheets with every episode we release. So now, without further ado, let's start with our advanced introduction to collocations. Now, what are collocations? A collocation is a combination of two or more words which frequently occur together. If someone says, "She's got yellow hair," they would probably be understood, but it is not what would ordinarily be said in English. We'd say she's got blonde hair. In other words, yellow doesn't collocate with hair in everyday English. Yellow collocates with, say, flowers or paint, but not with hair. Collocations are not just a matter of how adjectives combine with nouns. They can refer to any kind of typical word combination. For example, verb with noun, like when we say arouse someone's interest, lead a seminar. An adverb with an adjective, like fundamentally different. An adverb with a verb, like flatly contradict. A noun with a noun, like when we say a lick of paint, a team of experts, words of wisdom, etc. And there's more. Phrasal verbs like come up with, run up, adhere to, and compound nouns like economy, drive, stock market are sometimes described as types of collocations, but it is not always easy to separate collocations and compounds. And that being said, it can be difficult for learners of English to know which words collocate, as natural collocations are not always logical or guessable. There is, for example, no obvious reasons why we say making friends rather than saying just getting friends, and why we say heavy rain, not strong rain. Learners also need to know when specific collocations are appropriate. And this is usually referred to by linguistics as knowing which register to use. For example, alight from a bus is a formal collocation used in notices and other official contexts. In everyday situations, we would, of course, always talk about getting off a bus, not alight from a bus. And now we come to a very important question. Okay, these are the collocations, very nice, but why is it important to learn collocations? An appreciation of collocation will help you to use the words you know more accurately. In other words, you'll make fewer mistakes, not you will do fewer mistakes. So because we use make with mistakes and not do. You will sound more natural when you speak and write. Now, by saying, for example, of great importance rather than of big or high importance, you won't just be understood, you will quite rightly sound like a fluent user of English. And another benefit for learning collocations is to vary your speech and probably more importantly, your writing. Instead of repeating everyday words like very, good, nice, you will be able to exploit a wide range of language. You would gain more marks in an exam, for example, because compare these two ways of writing exactly the same thing. We can write, "We had a very happy holiday in a nice little village surrounded by beautiful mountains." And that's perfectly correct, no problems at all. But with some knowledge of collocations, you can change this into a better version by saying, for example, "We had a blissfully happy holiday in a picturesque little village surrounded by spectacular mountains." Much better, no? And finally, you can understand when a skillful writer departs from normal patterns of collocation, like a journalist, poet, advertiser, or other inventive user of language. They often create an effect by not choosing the expected collocation. When you know the collocations, you will understand this even better. For example, a travel article about the Italian capital might be entitled "No Place Like Rome," and that's a reference to the popular expression, "There's no place like home." So, with that being said, let's move on to talk about three types of collocations: strong collocations, fixed collocations, and weak collocations. Now, what is the difference between these, and why is it important to know what strong, fixed, and weak collocations are? Well, first, let's talk about strong collocations. A strong collocation is one in which the words are very closely associated with each other. For example, the adjective mitigating almost always collocates with circumstances or factors. It rarely collocates with any other word. For example, although she was found guilty, the jury felt there were mitigating circumstances, and that means factors or circumstances that lessen the blame. Now, let me give you some more examples of strong collocations. For example, we say, inclement weather was expected. That is very formal and it means unpleasant weather. Inclement collocates almost exclusively with weather. We don't find it with other words. She has auburn hair. Auburn collocates only with words connected with hair, like curls, tresses, locks, etc. But we don't find it with other words. I felt deliriously happy, which means extremely happy. Now, deliriously is strongly associated with happy. It's not used with glad, content, or sad, for example. The chairperson adjourned the meeting. That means have a pause or rest during a meeting or trial. And adjourn is a very strongly associated with meeting and trial. So these were examples of strong collocations. What about fixed collocations? Fixed collocations are collocations so strong that they cannot be changed in any way. For example, you can say, I was walking to and fro, and that means I was walking in one direction and then in the opposite direction a repeated number of times. No other words can replace to or fro or and in this collocation. It is completely fixed. And the meaning of some fixed collocations cannot be guessed from the individual words, and these collocations are called idioms. And then we have the weak collocations, which are thankfully the majority of collocations. Weak collocations are made up of words that collocate with a wide range of other words. For example, you can say you are in broad agreement with someone. That means generally in agreement with them. However, broad can also be used with a number of other words like a broad avenue, a broad smile, broad shoulders, a broad accent means a strong accent, a broad hint, and so on. These are weak collocations in the sense that broad collocates with a broad range of different nouns. Strong collocations and weak collocations form a continuum with stronger ones at one end and weaker ones at the other. Now, most collocations lie somewhere between the two. For example, the formal adjective picturesque collocates with village, location, and town, and so appears near the middle of the continuum. And as I said, thankfully, most collocations are in the middle, between weak and strong. They're not always weak, that can be used with a broad range of different words, and they're not strong, that can be used with very limited words. And now, of course, collocations have grammatical categories, and we will learn collocations from all the grammatical categories in this Collocations Advanced series. But these categories can be verb with noun, noun with verb, noun with noun, adjective with noun, adverb with adjective, and verb with adverb or prepositional phrase. I won't give you examples of these because we will have a lot of examples in the coming episodes of this series. But I want to talk about one more thing that is very important to fully understand the power of collocations and the differences that we have in collocations, and that is register. Now, what is register? Our use of language changes according to the situation that we are in. If your close friend hosts a party, you could say, thanks for the party, it was a blast. And here, it was a blast is very informal. However, if your boss was the host, you would probably say, thanks for the party, I really enjoyed it. That's neutral in this example. Well, in this example, neutral and very informal are both examples of register. The register of most language is neutral, which means that it can be used in any situation. However, register can also be formal, informal, characteristic of certain professional field, like legal, journalistic, or media, or specific to official notices and forms. Our choice of register depends on what we are talking about, the business, the news, the neighbors, and who we are talking to. Are we talking to friends, strangers, figures of authority, and how we are talking to them? Are we talking to them in a letter, in an email, in public, in private? Now, to understand this better, I will say the same thing in different ways, and I will show you how different the register is. And when the register is different, we can use different words and obviously different collocations with the same words, but the meaning is the same. So let's start with the first one, which is neutral. The police are investigating or are looking into the arms deal. Now, it is neutral. That means either version would not seem out of place in any spoken or written context. You can use it anywhere, anytime. It's neutral. But let's use it in an informal register. The cops are trying to dig out info about the arms deal. Now, dig out info about the arms deal is informal. Phrasal verbs are often an informal alternative, although some are neutral. Let's use it in a formal register. The police are conducting an investigation into the arms deal. That is formal. Now, longer words of Latin or Greek origin often indicate more formal language. And sometimes the register is not only neutral, informal, or formal. It can be neutral but journalistic, like when we say police to probe arms deal. Now, probe is typical of newspaper headline style, or it can be legal and official by saying the arms deal may be subject to police investigation. Now, subject to investigation is typical of a bureaucratic or legal style. Now, be careful not to think of formal language as written and informal language as spoken. There's a lot of overlap. For example, markedly formal language is most typical of official or academic writing and official legal or bureaucratic speech. Informal language is typical of conversation, personal letters and emails, messages on social media, and some journalism. Now let's take a look at an example for formal versus neutral collocations. Now, to be formal, we can say students must submit their assignments by the 1st of May. But if we want to use neutral or spoken, we can say you have to hand in your assignment by May the 1st, not submit. We can be formal by saying students may request an extension after consulting their tutor, or we can be neutral or spoken by saying you can ask for an extension after you've talked or after you've had a word with your tutor. Now, let's see informal versus neutral collocations. For example, the film was totally awesome, and that is mainly used by teenagers predominantly in the United States, and the neutral equivalent will be absolutely amazing, fantastic, etc. We can say the party was well good. Now, well used to mean very or really, mainly by younger UK speakers. Now, obviously, if you want to be neutral, you can simply use very or really. Another example, I haven't a clue, or I haven't the foggiest idea what you mean. If we don't want to sound informal, the neutral equivalent is I have no idea. We can grab a snack before the meeting if you're hungry, and the neutral equivalent for that is to have a snack. So, with that being said, I hope that was a good introduction. I know it's advanced, and that's the point, because this is Collocations Advanced. So, if you feel that it is a little bit difficult for you, don't forget that we have Collocations Intermediate, which you might find more suitable for your level at the moment. But you can always come back to this level and improve your English even further. But that is going to be Collocations Advanced. With that being said, that will be everything for this episode. I would like to thank you very much for listening to this episode. And don't forget, you can find the transcript of this episode in a link I will leave in the description. And there's also a link to Patreon where you can go and become a patron of the show and get a PDF practice worksheet with every single episode we release. This is your host, Danny. Thank you very much for listening to another episode from English Plus Podcast. I will see you next time.